Let's make this a challenge. Think you know which chapter tops the deadliest list? Is it the Ultramarines with their endless successors? The Grey Knights with unmatched psychic power? Or the Raven Guard with surgical strikes? Before you guess, remember, this isn't about popularity or flashy lore. We're testing cold criteria, speed and precision, reach and scale, and resilience over time. Pick your chapter now and see if science proves you right. Drop your choice in the comments before we start. Just one word. What does deadliest even mean? When people argue about which Space Marine chapter is the deadliest, the debate usually spirals into fan favorites, memes, or which Codex edition made someone overpowered. But we're cutting through all of that with a structured approach. No bias, no headcanon, just a framework that breaks deadliness into 5 categories. First, brute force. Can they smash through enemies with sheer strength, raw firepower, or overwhelming shock assault? Second, special powers. Not every chapter fights the same way. Some bring psychic domination, others superior craftsmanship, and others guerrilla tactics. Third, numbers. Warhammer 40k is a galaxy at war, and scale matters. A chapter that can project power across multiple war zones simultaneously has an advantage that no surgical strike team can replicate. Fourth, tactics. Strategy determines whether an army spends lives recklessly or wins battles with surgical efficiency. And fifth, resilience. The long game. Wars in the 41st millennium are measured in decades. Which chapters can still fight effectively when the first wave of glory has burned out? We'll grade each chapter across these 5 categories using 3 tiers of ranking. Tier 1 means they dominate in that axis. Tier 2 means they're strong but situational. Tier 3 means it's comparative weakness. This way, we're not just saying who's cooler, we're putting every chapter under the same scientific lens. By the end, you'll see how different doctrines, whether psychic warfare, stealth infiltration, brute strength, or massive organizational reach, stack against each other. The Grey Knights are the Emperor's scalpel, engineered not for conquest, but for surgical precision. Where other chapters rely on strength, doctrine, or technology, the Grey Knights begin with something no other Space Marine can match. Every single one of them is a psyker. That fact alone sets them apart. While most chapters treat psykers as rare specialists, the Grey Knights wield psychic mastery as their default setting. Their powers aren't just weapons, they are shields, exorcisms, and psychic wards that made them the galaxy's most incorruptible demon hunters. While even the mightiest librarians of other chapters risk corruption, Grey Knights are deliberately designed, genetically and spiritually, to resist it. On brute force, they rank Tier 2. They don't field massive numbers, but Nemesis force weapons and psychic might let them hit far above their weight. On special powers, they are Tier 1. Their psychic mastery is unrivaled. Every knight is essentially a living psychic weapon. On numbers, they fall to Tier 3. The Grey Knights are small by design, deliberately hidden, and tightly controlled by the Inquisition. On tactics, they're Tier 1. Every deployment is surgical, precise, and built around catastrophic threats where failure isn't an option. On resilience, they're Tier 2. They endure corruption-free and maintain elite training, but they lack long-term adaptability and replenishment of larger chapters. Overall, the Grey Knights are Tier 2, unmatched against demons, but too specialized to dominate the galaxy. If the Grey Knights are the scalpel of the Imperium, the Ultramarines are the backbone. They are not the most exotic nor the most specialized, but they are the chapter that sets the standard for all others. And sometimes being the standard is exactly what makes you the most dangerous. The Ultramarines' deadliest weapon doesn't come from mutation, secret weapons, or one-off tactics. It comes from organization and replication. Their Primarch, Roboute Guilliman, didn't just lead a legion. He wrote the Codex Astartes, the definitive guidebook that dictates how nearly every other chapter in the Imperium fights. That book is more than a military doctrine. It's a blueprint for survival. And when Guilliman returned to the galaxy, he didn't just bring back a leader. He revived a living embodiment of that codex. making the Ultramarines more influential than ever. On brute force, the Ultramarines sit at Tier 2. They are highly disciplined, with balanced squads and excellent coordination, but they aren't specialized shock troops like the Blood Angels or Berserkers like the Space Wolves. Instead, their power lies in consistency. They don't need to be the strongest in any one engagement because they rarely fight alone. On special powers, they also rank Tier 2. They don't have psychic supremacy like the Grey Knights or the stealth mastery of the Raven Guard, but their special power is adaptability. The Codex Astartes provides a framework flexible enough to apply to almost any war zone, giving Ultramarine commanders a tactical edge. On numbers, the Ultramarines are Tier 1. This is their greatest strength. With their countless successors spread across the galaxy, the Ultramarines form an alliance web that no other chapter can match. When Guilliman calls, dozens of chapters respond, creating coalition forces that resemble modern-day military alliances like NATO. This scaling factor means that even if the Ultramarines themselves are not everywhere, their influence absolutely is. On tactics, they are Tier 1 again. Precision, discipline, and codex-driven doctrine makes them masters of coordination. Their strategies are tried, tested, and reinforced by centuries of successful campaigns. Unlike guerrilla fighters, they don't vanish into the shadows. They hold the field, shape it, and grind their enemies into dust through sheer cohesion. On resilience, the Ultramarines are also Tier 1. The fortress realm of Ultramar is one of the most stable regions in the Imperium, capable of producing not just Astartes, but mortal armies, fleets, and infrastructure. Their political influence, combined with Guilliman's leadership, gives them sustainability other chapters can only dream of. They don't just survive campaigns, they endure across millennia. Overall, the Ultramarines are Tier 1 deadliest. Not the flashiest or most specialized, but the chapter whose reach, resilience, and ability to project power make them the Imperium's most strategically divisive force. The Salamanders are not the largest, the flashiest, or even the most talked about chapter, but ask anyone in the Imperium who's fought beside them, and they'll tell you one thing. The Salamanders are the most human of all the Space Marines, and that humanity is exactly what makes them so dangerous. While most chapters see civilians as a distraction, or worse, expendable, the Salamanders define their mission around protecting those lives. This changes everything about how they fight. It changes where they choose to land, how they plan campaigns, and even how they design their war gear. To them, survival isn't just about holding the line, it's about ensuring that humanity itself can endure. Salamanders rank Tier 2. Their signature use of flame and melta weaponry turns the battlefield into a furnace. These weapons are devastating in close quarters, burning through fortifications and armor alike. Combined with their reputation for heavy infantry assaults, Salamanders bring reliable destruction wherever they go. They're not reckless berserkers, but when they commit, the sheer stopping power of their weapons is undeniable. On special powers, Salamanders also rank Tier 2. They don't rely on psychic domination like the Grey Knights or infiltration like the Raven Guard. Instead, their special power is craftsmanship. Every Salamander is a smith, and their war gear reflects that. Their bolters, flamers, and armor are artisanal pieces, maintained to perfection. On the battlefield, this means fewer malfunctions, fewer weak points, and a consistency that gives them an invisible edge. On numbers, Salamanders sit at Tier 3. They do have successors, but they're far fewer than the sprawling network the Ultramarines can call upon. The Salamanders simply don't scale. Their strength lies in quality, not quantity. On tactics, Salamanders occupy Tier 2. Their strategies are slower and more deliberate, often prioritizing civilian evacuation or infrastructure defense over rapid strikes. Critics say this slows them down, but what those critics miss is how much long-term stability that builds. By protecting the very populations they fight for, Salamanders ensure loyalty, supply lines, and morale in ways other chapters can't replicate. On resilience, Salamanders are Tier 1. Their endurance is legendary, not just in surviving battles, but in sustaining campaigns. Their strong ties with Forge Worlds ensure steady supplies of high-quality gear. Their moral compass means they don't burn out under psychological toll or endless war. And their bond with civilians guarantees that wherever they fight with the support of the people. Overall, Salamanders are Tier 2. They don't dominate galactic war like the Ultramarines, but in a single engagement, their reliability, resilience, and humanity make them terrifying opponents. If the Salamanders define deadliest through resilience and humanity, the Raven Guard embody the opposite philosophy: fear, shadows, and disruption. To face the Raven Guard is not to meet an army on the battlefield. It's to realize that the war was lost before the first shot was ever fired. From the very beginning, under their Primarch Corvus Corax, the Raven Guard were shaped around infiltration and sabotage. Their doctrine was never about holding lines or launching overwhelming assaults. It was about striking high-value targets, cutting the enemy's lifeblood, and vanishing before retaliation could land. In this sense, they are the closest thing the Imperium has to a galactic-scale special operations force. On brute force, the Raven Guard fall into Tier 3. They are not designed to trade blows with enemy legions in open combat. Against entrenched armies, fortresses, or prolonged sieges, they struggle. Their reliance on speed and stealth limit their raw destructive presence. On special powers, they rank Tier 2. Their special power is not psychic ability or superhuman endurance, it's doctrine. Their mastery of stealth, infiltration, and sabotage acts as a force multiplier. While other chapters rely on overwhelming numbers or firepower, the Raven Guard rely on precision. On numbers, they rank Tier 3. The Raven Guard do not have a vast successor network, and their footprint in the galaxy is far smaller than chapters like the Ultramarines. Their limited size makes them dangerous, but not omnipresent. On tactics, they shine at Tier 1. Here lies their true strength. By targeting enemy leadership, communications, and supply lines, they dismantle armies without ever needing to destroy them directly. One successful infiltration can triple weeks of enemy operations. One assassination can paralyze an entire command chain. And unlike brute force campaigns, these victories cost very little in terms of manpower. On resilience, the Raven Guard hold Tier 2. They can sustain guerrilla campaigns for long periods, but their reliance on stealth means that once exposed or bogged down in attrition warfare, they struggle. They lack the long-term staying power of chapters like the Ultramarines or Salamanders. But what makes them terrifying isn't just the efficiency, it's the psychology. Armies that face the Raven Guard quickly learn that nowhere is safe. Commanders disappear, ammunition depots explode from within, morale collapses under the weight of paranoia. Fear itself becomes a weapon, destabilizing enemies before the Raven Guard even arrive. Overall, Raven Guard are Tier 2 deadliest. Their doctrine of silent killing makes them devastating in disruption, but their lack of numbers and brute power keeps them from rising to the very top. So, who is the deadliest chapter? Let's tally it up. Grey Knights, Tier 2. Unmatched against demons, but too specialized to reshape galactic wars. Raven Guard, Tier 2. Terrifying in disruption, but lack numbers and brute force. Salamanders, Tier 2. Resilient and humane, deadly in every engagement, but too limited in scale. Ultramarines, Tier 1. The only chapter to dominate in numbers, tactics, and resilience. Their Codex discipline and galaxy-spanning successors make them the most strategically deadly of all. Final winner, the Ultramarines. Not because they're the flashiest, but because they're the chapter that can actually decide the fate of entire sectors over centuries of war. Now it's your turn. Type Psych for Grey Knights, Scalpel for Raven Guard, Forge for Salamanders, or Empire for Ultramarines in the comments, and explain which axis decided it for you. If this breakdown flipped your perspective, share it with a friend. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more Warhammer science breakdowns. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, even science can't save you. From the debate in the comments.